My son's message came at 8:47 p.m. You won't be joining us. My wife prefers to keep it only her family. You've already done your part by paying. That was it. No thank you. No love you. Just finality wrapped in politeness. I sat at the kitchen table, my reading glasses sliding down my nose, the soft hum of the refrigerator filling the quiet. 2 nights before, I'd packed little Aloha bags for each grandchild, tiny bottles of sunscreen. Seashell keychains that said Grandma loves you. My hands still smelled of tape and lotion. The trip had been my dream for 3 years. My way to bring everyone together. But apparently I'd already done my part. The phone buzzed again. Don't take it personally, Mom. It's just simpler this way. Simpler. Such an easy word for something that breaks you. I didn't cry. I just stared at the phone until the screen dimmed, and the room seemed to fold in on itself. Then I placed it face down on the table, like closing a door I hadn't meant to shut. I remembered Nathan as a boy, with skinned knees and wide eyes, telling me I was his best friend. I remembered the Mother's Day cards that made me cry. The pink tulips every March. The picture he drew in 2nd grade, me in a cape with the words, "My mom saves the day." I used to believe that. The small duffel by the door still sat open to sundresses. A photo of my late husband James, and a lavender candle for the beach memorial I'd planned. Now the candle would stay unlit. I rose slowly, every step deliberate, and walked to the den. My old laptop blinked awake, the screen's glow painting the room silver. I opened the folder labeled Hawaii Family Trip, Flights, Villa, Luau, Snorkeling Lessons. Every detail paid for, arranged, cared for, and all of it built on trust. I hovered over the freeze account button on the travel fund page. One click could stop everything. One click could make the silence mutual, but I didn't click. Not yet. Because mothers always wait for one more chance to be remembered. Instead, I opened a blank document and typed 3 words. New guest list. I didn't know why not yet, but as I looked at those words, something inside me shifted. The fridge hummed. The clock ticked. And somewhere between them, a woman stopped waiting to be invited. I woke before sunrise, though I hadn't really slept. The house was wrapped in that thin, gray light that makes everything look lonelier than it is. The kettle hissed, the clock ticked, and somewhere down the street a dog barked once, then fell silent. I made peppermint tea, the kind James used to brew on sleepless nights, and waited for the ache in my chest to fade. It didn't. I kept hearing his words. You've already done your part. Strange how a single sentence can echo louder than a scream. I sat at the table and asked the question no mother wants to. When did I become extra in the story I helped create? It hadn't happened all at once. No explosions. No fights. Just small absences that piled up like dust. A Christmas I wasn't told about until the night before. Photos posted online where everyone smiled except me, because I wasn't there. Tanya's little corrections in front of the children. Her "oh, don't bother Grandma with that" laugh, each moment tiny. Harmless almost. Until you realize the warmth is gone and you're the only one still pretending to feel it. I opened my laptop again. The glow from the screen touched my hands, made them look older, thinner. The Hawaii trip folder blinked back at me. I clicked it open. It was all still there: flight plans, villa reservations, excursion schedules, everything I'd built like a bridge back to them. Then I noticed something I hadn't seen before. Primary guest Tanya Monroe. And under it, billing card ending in 09. My card, her name. The air left the room. They hadn't forgotten me, they had rewritten me out. I sat very still. The kind of stillness that isn't peace, but decision forming. Then, almost without thinking, I stood and went to the hallway closet. On the top shelf sat my old mason jar, the dream jar. The one I'd fed for years with stray bills and quiet hopes. Hawaii 2020, for family together again. I held it up to the window. Inside, only a few coins remained, shining faintly like the last pieces of something sacred. Not all dreams are meant to be shared, I whispered, outside. The first light broke across the fence, thin and gold. I could see my reflection in the glass-tired eyes. Yes, but clear. They thought I'd stay quiet. They thought I'd bless their betrayal. But they'd forgotten who taught them strength, and strength, once awakened, does not go back to sleep.by mid-morning. The decision had already started to bloom inside me, quiet, steady, inevitable. I didn't pace or cry or pray for understanding. I just sat in my chair, listening to the kettle whistle, and thought about how often love makes fools of women who mean well. I opened my laptop again. The same familiar blue light spread across the room. My name still sat at the top of the account page. Account holder Marilyn Rose Monroe. Below it, linked card 6. Every one of them pulling from the same well. My well. The cursor blinked beside the words freeze account. It was such a small thing, a button. A toggle. One click. That's all. I thought about the irony. For years, I'd told Nathan to pause before reacting, to think before acting on impulse. Now it was my turn to pause, not out of hesitation, but precision, because this wasn't revenge. It was a boundary long overdue. Still, I waited. I picked up my phone and typed a message. Let me know if you need any help packing the kids' bags. I can bring snacks for motion sickness bands. I stared at it for a long moment. Then hit send. A small act of grace, one final chance. Minutes passed. Then an hour. I saw the read mark appear beneath my message, glowing like proof. No reply. I looked out the window. The wind was stirring the birdbath James had built, rippling the surface just enough to catch a glint of sun. It reminded me of something he once said, the week Nathan left for college. You can't fix distance by paying for the ticket. I hadn't understood it then. I do now. The phone stayed silent. And so, finally, I clicked, freeze account activated. The words appeared in small blue letters, but they filled the whole room. No alarms. No drama, just stillness. A woman reclaiming what was hers. I closed the laptop, took a long breath, and felt something I hadn't felt in years: control. Not power, not pride. Just a soft steadiness that comes when your heart stops begging to be understood. Outside, the mail truck passed, slow and ordinary. But for me, everything had changed. They were going to learn that money wasn't the only thing I'd saved. I had also saved myself. The house felt different the next morning, lighter, almost forgiving. Funny how peace can follow a storm when you stop fighting the wind. I brewed coffee instead of tea. James used to say tea was for mending hearts, but coffee was for making choices. I sat at my desk and opened a blank document. The title appeared before I even thought about it. New guest list. It looked odd at first, sitting there alone on the screen, too hopeful, too final. I wasn't sure what it meant yet, but it felt right. For years, every plan I'd made had revolved around others, their comfort, their schedules, their preferences. I'd built my whole life around making room for people who never noticed the space I cleared for them. Now I would build something else. I typed the first name that came to mind. Carol, then Louise, then Beverly. Women from church, from the neighborhood, women who knew quiet the way I did. Carol, whose son hadn't called since she got sick. Louise, who lost her husband last fall and still set a place for him at dinner. Beverly, who'd raised 3 grandchildren but wasn't invited to their graduations. Each name felt like a heartbeat on the page. I paused and stared at the list, the glow of the monitor soft on my face. Something inside me began to loosen. That old ache that said you're forgotten started to fade. But under the calm, another thought crept in. When had Nathan stopped looking at me with kindness? Was it after James passed? After I sold the house and moved closer to help with the kids? Or had it started even earlier, the day I made a choice he never forgave? I shook the thought away, but it lingered. There were things we'd never spoken about, debts unpaid, words unsaid. And maybe that silence had grown roots. I saved the document and closed the laptop. The word saved appeared briefly on the screen, so small, but it made me smile. Maybe I couldn't fix the family I lost, but I could build something new, something honest. I looked toward the window. The wind had picked up, carrying the faint scent of rain. Somewhere in that soft rumble of thunder, I heard James again. You can't fix distance with money, Marilyn, but you can build bridges with truth. And for the first time in a long time, I whispered back, I'm ready to build. I didn't plan it like a rebellion. It started like a whisper, a small act of grace in a world that had grown too loud with disappointment. The following afternoon, I sat in the den, notebook open, pen trembling slightly between my fingers. Across the top of the page, I wrote 6 words, those who deserve to be seen. It felt good just to write them, like a promise, or maybe a prayer. I began calling the names from my list. Carol answered first, her voice thin with surprise. Marilyn? It's been ages. I know, I said softly. How are you holding up? There was a pause, and then that quiet honesty that comes only from the lonely. Some days are long, she said. I told her I was thinking of taking a small trip, nothing fancy, just somewhere warm. Would you come with me? I asked. The silence on the other end was sharp, fragile. Me? She whispered. Yes, you. When she cried, I didn't interrupt. Louise said yes before I even finished my sentence. Beverly needed a moment, then said she hadn't been near an ocean in 20 years. By sunset. The list was full, 6 women who'd been forgotten by everyone except one another. That night, I opened my laptop again, but this time the glow didn't feel cold. I searched for rentals near the ocean. The same villa appeared on the screen, the one I'd booked for my family. Its photos still shimmered with soft golden light. For a moment, I hesitated. Then I smiled. Why not? I whispered. He always said I had good taste. This time, the booking form listed one name only, Marilyn Rose Monroe. When the confirmation email arrived, my hands trembled. But it wasn't guilt. It was something I hadn't felt in years, anticipation. I poured a glass of iced tea and carried it to the back porch. The sky was deep purple now, clouds stretching thin across the horizon. Fireflies blinked near the garden fence. I thought about Nathan, where he was, what he'd tell the kids about Grandma's absence, whether he'd even noticed the silence yet. And then, from inside the house, I heard the faint ding of my phone. One new message. His name on the screen. My heart slowed. I didn't open it right away. Some messages, I've learned, are easier to read when you already know the ending. The phone buzzed again, low and steady on the table beside me. For a moment, I just watched it. The screen glowed in the dark like a small heartbeat. I wasn't sure I wanted to check. I told myself to ignore it. I had earned the right to silence. But curiosity is a stubborn thing, especially when it wears your son's name. So I picked it up. Mom, I hope you're okay. We're heading to the airport tomorrow. Tanya's nervous, kids are excited. I know you probably feel left out, but it's just better this way. No tension, no awkwardness. I'll call when we land. Better this way. There it was again, that tone. Not cruel, not angry, just indifferent. Like I'd been written out of his piece. I read the message twice, then a third time. The words didn't sting anymore. They just echoed. I set the phone down and walked to the old photo wall in the hallway. There we were, me, Nathan, and James, standing by the lake on his 8th birthday. His hair was wild from the wind, his smile too big for his face. James had his arm around us both. Back then, we were a trio. Unbreakable, I thought, but I'd been wrong before. When James died, Nathan changed overnight. He stopped calling for advice. He moved across the state and sent messages instead of visits. At first, I blamed grief. Then I blamed distance. Eventually, I blamed myself. Maybe I'd loved him too tightly. Maybe I'd tried too hard to fill the space his father left behind. And maybe he'd mistaken my care for control. I touched a photo glass lightly with my fingertips. You don't have to protect her from me, I whispered, though I wasn't sure who I meant, Tanya or Nathan himself. Then I turned off the light. In the kitchen, the clock struck midnight. I poured myself a glass of water, and the phone buzzed again, another message. By the way, thank you for everything, Mom. I know you mean well. Mean well. The phrase landed like a sigh in the room. I set the phone down for the last time. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my calendar app and circled the date of their flight in red. 8 a.m. Lax. One last reminder, not for them, but for me. To remember that some lessons can only be learned mid-air, when the ground finally disappears beneath you. I woke before the alarm. Not from nerves, from knowing, outside, the world was still half asleep. A streak of pale orange slipped through the blinds, and the air smelled faintly of rain. Somewhere down the street, a car door closed, and I imagined families loading luggage, children tugging on backpacks, parents checking tickets twice, somewhere. Mine was doing the same. I poured coffee and sat by the window. On the table beside me, the clock read 7:53 a.m. Their flight was at 8:00. The phone sat face down, just as I'd left it. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. I already knew what would happen. At 7:59. The first vibration came, a single buzz, like a hesitant knock. Then another, then two more in quick succession. I didn't rush. I let the moment stretch, like an old film reel slowing down to make every frame count. When I finally turned the phone over, the screen was lit with his name. Mom, can you check the travel fund? It's saying payment declined. Mom, they can't find the villa confirmation. Please call me, Mom, please. I read each one carefully. Like a prayer I'd already memorized, there was no anger in me. No satisfaction either. Just release. I set the phone down and walked to the back porch. The morning light was soft, forgiving. Birds picked at the grass. Somewhere inside, the kettle began to whistle. They had taken my silence for weakness. But silence, I was learning, is its own kind of strength, a language that only the guilty truly hear. I stood there for a long while, letting the air move through me. The phone buzzed again, voicemails now. The first began with confusion, the second with panic. By the third, I could almost hear his voice breaking. I didn't listen. Instead, I opened my laptop and clicked the folder labeled New Guest List. The names were still there, waiting. Carol, Louise, Beverly. 6 women whose lives had shrunk around them the same way mine had. I smiled softly and began to type. Departure date: 1 week from today. Destination: Hawaii. Purpose: healing. Outside, the clouds began to part, and the sunlight fell across the table where my phone still vibrated. Let them call. Let them learn. Money can buy a vacation, but only presence can make a family, and I was finally done paying for both. By noon, the calls had stopped. The silence that followed was thick but peaceful, the kind that settles after a storm has said everything it needed to. I made another cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the phone like it was an old friend I no longer owed an answer to. The voicemail count blinked at me. 14. I didn't open a single one. A few hours later, an email arrived. The subject line read, Refund Notification Travel Account. I clicked it. One by one, the confirmations appeared. The villa, the airline, the car rental, the snorkeling lessons, the luau. Each transaction reversed. Each payment restored. By evening, the account balance had returned to what it once was, my number, my effort, my sacrifice, back where it belonged. But this time, it didn't feel like money. It felt like dignity. I leaned back in my chair and smiled faintly. You can't spend gratitude, I whispered to the empty room, but you can save your peace. The next morning, I opened my notebook again. The list of names stared back at me, and for the first time, it didn't look like a dream, it looked like a plan. I picked up the phone. Good morning, Carol, I said softly when she answered. Pack something light. We're going somewhere warm. Her breath caught. You're serious? Completely. What about your family? I paused, letting the question hang in the air. Sometimes, you have to leave the wrong people behind to find the right ones waiting. By the end of the day, every woman had confirmed. Each voice carried disbelief, joy, hesitation, and then laughter, the kind that shakes the dust off a tired heart. That night, I reopened the travel site. The same villa was still listed, available again, the one perched above the ocean, with the wide balcony and the fire pit I'd imagined for candlelight. I booked it under my name. No co-signers, no second approvals. Just me. The confirmation email came instantly. Reservation confirmed. 6 guests, 1 host. I exhaled. Slow and deep. It was strange how healing could look so much like starting over. Outside, the night wind pressed softly against the windows. The world was quiet again, but the silence felt different, not empty, not cold. It felt like space, The kind of space where something new could finally begin. The plane landed just as the sun began to slide into the ocean. Through the small oval window, the world below glowed gold water shimmering like glass. Palms bowing to the wind, Hawaii. The place I'd imagined for 3 years, but this time, it felt entirely new. Beside me, Carol pressed her face to the glass, eyes wide. "It's even prettier than the postcards," she whispered. Louise chuckled softly. "I still can't believe you did this, Marilyn." I smiled. "Neither can I." When we stepped off the plane, the air wrapped around us warm, sweet, alive. The scent of salt and hibiscus filled every breath. For a moment, I thought of Nathan, of the trip that should have been. Then I let the thought drift away, carried by the same breeze that tousled my hair. The car ride to the villa was quiet, peaceful. 6 women, each lost in her own thoughts, each carrying invisible stories in her lap like folded letters. When we arrived, the driver helped with the luggage. I stood by the entrance, staring up at the villa that had once represented rejection and now renewal. The front doors opened onto wide windows framing the sea. Light spilled across the polished floors. I walked in first, my sandals whispering against the wood, and set a single framed photo on the table. James, smiling under a sun hat, holding a fishing rod crookedly like a comedian posing for a poster. He looked right at home. One by one, the women stepped inside. Beverly gasped. Nora covered her mouth. Frances let out a trembling laugh that sounded almost like a sob. "This," I said quietly, "is what family looks like when no one's keeping score." That night, we ate dinner on the balcony. The air hummed with crickets and soft conversation. Carol poured the wine. Louise told a story about her wedding day gone wrong. Beverly showed a photo of her late brother and said it felt like he was sitting right there in the breeze. I didn't talk much. I just listened. For once, I wasn't the giver. I was simply there. Later, as the stars came out, Frances turned to me and said, "I forgot what laughter sounded like when it wasn't forced." I smiled. "Then we'll keep laughing until it feels natural again." The ocean answered with a gentle crash, as if agreeing, and in that sound, I realized something. Peace doesn't arrive with forgiveness. It arrives when you stop waiting for it to be granted. The 5th morning on the island began with rain. Not the kind that ruins a day, the soft, forgiving kind that smells like renewal. I sat by the open window, the scent of wet earth and ocean salt blending into something familiar, something like memory. The others were still asleep, their laughter from the night before still echoing faintly through the villa walls. The place felt alive, like it had absorbed the sound of joy and refused to let it go. I poured coffee and opened my laptop, intending to check flight confirmations for our return. But instead, there it was, an unread mail. From Nathan Monroe. Subject: "Just want to clear the air." My breath caught. I hadn't expected to hear from him so soon, or maybe I'd secretly been expecting it all along. I hesitated, the cursor blinking like a heartbeat, then clicked. "Hi, Mom. We're back now." The trip didn't go as planned. A lot went wrong. Tanya was upset. The kids were confused. Maybe we didn't handle things right. She says hi. By the way, she was just trying to make it special in her own way. You know how she is, anyway. I've been thinking, maybe we weren't fair. Maybe we hurt you. That wasn't my intention. We're in a tight spot now, financially, after having to rebook everything. So, if you're able, could you return the deposit we gave for the trip, or part of it? Just until we catch up. We'll talk things through when we can. Love, Nathan. I reread it slowly. Every line. It wasn't an apology. Not really. It was a transaction wearing the costume of remorse. The phrase that stayed with me wasn't love, Nathan. It was "if you're able." As if kindness were a currency I owed him on demand. I closed the laptop and stared out at the horizon. The rain had stopped, and a faint rainbow arched across the ocean, soft and almost shy. Behind me, Carol's laughter echoed down the hallway. She'd found the radio and was humming along to some old Elvis song. I smiled. Once, I would have answered his email immediately. I would have explained, justified, softened my own wound to protect his comfort. But not anymore. Some lessons aren't taught in love, they're taught in silence. And this time, Silence was the only answer that told the truth. I didn't reply to Nathan's email, not because I wanted to punish him, but because there was nothing left to explain. Some wounds close not with stitches, but with distance. Still, his words stayed in the room long after I closed the laptop, like the faint echo of a voice that used to sound like home. I went out to the balcony, coffee mug warm between my palms. The ocean stretched endless and blue, the sun climbing slow and steady from the horizon. I thought about every version of me that had lived before this one, the young wife who believed love could fix anything, the mother who mistook giving for being needed, the woman who stayed quiet to keep the peace. Each of them had built the foundation for who I was now. But I realized something in that golden light. I had spent my whole life trying to deserve what was already mine. Respect, rest, belonging. They were never gifts from others. They were birthrights I kept giving away. The screen door creaked behind me. Carol stepped out, still in her robe, hair wild from sleep. "You're up early," she said, pouring herself a cup of coffee. "Couldn't sleep," I admitted. "Old thoughts keeping me company." She smiled gently. "The stubborn kind? The kind that think they're still owed something," I said. Carol nodded slowly. "Maybe we all are. Or maybe we just kept waiting for someone to notice how much we gave." Her words sank deep, simple, but sharp. "I used to think love was about staying no matter what," I said. "Now I think it's about knowing when to go and when to stay gone." We stood there in silence, watching the waves roll and fold, each one different, but all carrying the same rhythm: retreat and return, retreat and return. And I understood something I'd missed all my life. Forgiveness isn't a bridge you build for someone else. It's the door you open so you can walk out of the fire and breathe again. Inside, laughter began again, soft, unhurried. Louise had found a deck of cards. Beverly was teasing her about cheating. Frances was humming as she cooked. It sounded like home. Maybe not the one I'd lost, but the one I was meant to find. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel replaced. I felt complete. That evening, we decided to eat outside. The air was still and golden, the sky painted in soft strokes of pink and silver. The ocean murmured below, steady as breath. I placed James's photo at the center of the long wooden table, his familiar grin catching the last light of the sun. One by one, the women joined me. Carol carried the candles. Louise brought the matches. Beverly had found seashells and lined them along the edge of the table, each one holding a folded piece of paper inside. "What are those for?" I asked. "Memories," she said simply. "Ones that don't fit anywhere else." We lit the candles together. The wicks flared, then steadied, their glow reflecting in the glasses and in the soft lines of our faces. Frances poured wine into mismatched cups. Nora leaned forward and whispered, "Do we say anything?" I nodded. "Just one thing you wish someone had told you sooner." For a moment, there was only the sound of the waves. Then, Carol spoke first. "I wish someone had told me I didn't have to earn rest." Louise followed. "That being strong doesn't mean being silent." Beverly's eyes glistened. "That love doesn't disappear just because someone leaves." Frances smiled through tears. "That it's okay to want joy after loss." And Nora, sweet Nora, whispered that I was never invisible. Each word floated into the air, soft but powerful, tiny truths carried on the wind. When it was my turn, I held the match for a long moment before speaking. "This candle," I said, "was supposed to be lit for my family, to remember James, to bring us together again." My voice wavered, but I didn't stop. "But maybe it was always meant for this moment instead. For the family that found me when I stopped waiting to be chosen." The flame caught, tall and steady. The women reached across the table, fingers brushing in a quiet chain of connection. No one spoke after that. We didn't need to. The light said enough. When the last bit of sun slipped below the horizon, I looked at James's photo and smiled. "You'd like them," I whispered. "They remind me of you." The wind moved gently through the candles, and for just a second, his smile seemed to flicker back. And I knew he was there, not as memory, but as peace. The next morning came soft and blue. The world was half awake, the kind of dawn that feels too gentle to belong to real life. I walked down to the beach barefoot, the cool sand folding around my feet like memory. Behind me, the villa was still quiet. The women slept in, their laughter from the night before still echoing faintly in the walls. The ocean stretched endless and calm. A thin line of light split the horizon, and I stood there, letting the waves crawl over my toes. I carried one candle, the lavender one, the last of the 7. James's favorite scent that it had burned halfway down the night before. Its wax cooled into soft ripples. I relit it with a match and watched the flame steady itself in the wind. This was supposed to be for them, I said aloud, the words carried away by the breeze. But maybe it was always meant for me. I crouched and set the candle near the tide. The flame flickered but didn't die. For a moment, I thought of Nathan again, not the man who'd sent those cold messages, but the little boy with scraped knees and messy hair, who once told his teacher that I was his hero. I realized I still loved him. I probably always would. But love doesn't always mean holding on. Sometimes it means setting both of you free. The wind picked up, and I felt it move through me, light and cool. I whispered the words I had been afraid to say for years. I forgive you. Not for him, for me. Because forgiveness, I finally understood, isn't a favor. It's an exit. It's how you walk away without dragging the fire with you. Behind me, footsteps approached. Carol, wrapped in a shawl, stopped beside me. Couldn't sleep either? I smiled. Didn't want to miss this. She looked at the candle. You're letting it go? I nodded. All of it. We stood together in silence as the sun rose, gold spilling across the water, touching everything it could reach. The candle's flame bent, swayed, then went out quietly, not with a hiss, but a sigh. I didn't cry. I just breathed. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like something had ended. I felt like something had finally begun. When I came back from the beach, the sun had fully risen. The villa was alive again, soft footsteps, the smell of coffee, the low hum of a kettle. Beverly was already at the table, brushing crumbs from a plate. She looked up when I entered. You were gone early, she said. I went to watch the sunrise, I replied. She smiled knowingly. You left something there, didn't you? I nodded. And found something too. The others joined us one by one, still in their robes, hair tousled, eyes sleepy but light. The energy was different now, gentler. Not women surviving, but women being. We sat together over breakfast. No schedule, no rush. Frances shared a joke that made us all laugh loud enough for the ocean to hear. Nora poured juice into mismatched glasses. Louise turned on an old song from her phone, the kind that makes you sway without realizing it. And as I looked at them, these women who had carried years of quiet heartbreak, who had been overlooked, underestimated, and still showed up to life with open hands, I felt something warm unfurl in my chest. Maybe this was the meaning I'd been chasing all along, not family by blood, but family by choice. Not perfection, but presence. I stood up and walked to the open doors that faced the ocean. The wind met me there, playful, familiar. It brushed against my hair like a friend saying, "You did it." Behind me, Carol called out, "Marilyn, what are you smiling about?" I turned, the light pouring in behind me, and said softly, about how peace finally found its way home. They didn't ask what I meant. They didn't need to. Later, when everyone had gone to pack, I sat by the window with James's photo on my lap. His grin looked the same, bright, mischievous, alive. I think I finally kept my promise, I whispered. I brought us all back together. Just not the way I thought. Outside, a single bird lifted off from the fence, soaring into the pale morning sky. I watched until it disappeared into the light. Maybe that's what forgiveness is, not erasing the past, but letting it take flight. I looked at the photo one last time and smiled. Sometimes, I said, losing someone teaches you how to love again. And for the first time, I believed it. When I came home, the first thing I noticed was how still everything was. The same kitchen table, the same humming refrigerator, the same clock above the stove, ticking the same rhythm it always had. But somehow, it all felt new, like the house had been waiting for me to return as someone different. I set my suitcase down and poured a glass of water. The air smelled faintly of lavender, the last candle's ghost, on the table. My phone sat exactly where I'd left it weeks ago. I picked it up, half expecting it to come alive with messages, but the screen stayed black. And for once, I didn't mind. I placed James's framed photo beside the vase of dried tulips. The glass caught a sliver of sunlight, scattering tiny reflections across the table. Then I sat down the same seat where I'd once read that message that broke me. "You've already done your part." I whispered the words, not with pain this time, but with understanding. He was right. In a way, I had done my part and I had finally learned where it ended. Doing your part doesn't mean shrinking to fit someone else's comfort. It means knowing when your love has done enough and letting the rest of life love you back. I reached for the old mason jar on the counter, my dream jar. Only a few coins clinked at the bottom now, but I didn't see emptiness anymore. I saw what those coins had built. Laughter under palm trees. Women healing together. A table full of light instead of silence. I smiled. It was worth every penny. Outside, the wind stirred the chimes James had hung years ago. They sang softly, not loud, not demanding, just present. I stood, walked to the window, and whispered the last thing left to say. "I forgive you, Nathan, for not seeing me, and for teaching me how to see myself." The wind moved through the curtains, cool and tender, as if it carried an answer I didn't need to hear. I turned back to the table, the same one where everything had ended, and smiled. Because I finally understood, endings aren't punishments. They're invitations to begin again. I lifted my glass. A quiet toast to the empty room, to peace, I said softly. The kind that doesn't ask for permission. And in that silence, for the first time in my life, I felt home. Sometimes the family you lose teaches you how to find yourself. And sometimes doing your part means learning to stop and let peace finish the rest.